All you hot messes, we are not in the studio this week, and we actually will be for a while for a couple of reasons, and I will not keep you in suspense. And we're going to tell you right now why we're not in the studio. It's because we're not in the studio. We can't. Oh boy, I'm bringing the hot and the mess to the Hot Mess Teacher Express this week. Because listen, I am a mom of two, and it's very, very hard for me to get away and to spend an entire weekend with my very dear friend, Vinny, unfortunately. I'm going to stay at home doing things remote. We're going to see how it goes. I'm really excited about it, actually, because I can record episodes right away, and if something comes up or we need to talk about something, we can record an episode right away. We don't have to wait. So I'm very, very excited about kind of this new little track we're taking for the Hot Mess Teacher Express. But it does mean that something else has to change too. I'm bringing the hot and the mess, and I feel like you're bringing the express.
I'm on
Vinny.
the train. I'm leaving the station. So yes, my name is Vinny Thomas, aka Mr. Thomas English, aka the British fella that's been on this for a few episodes. And yeah, this will be my last episode. I know myself and Jess have spoken about this. We don't hate each other. We do like one another, so we speak. And I know it's definitely been like an ongoing thing. Even when I first signed up, we were always kind of like, you know, with what I do with my content creation and just in the nature of like, I have to travel and do different things. And as well, like my content especially is quite, it's not as teacher heavy as it once was. So I think even signing up for this, we were both like, let's do it for now. We're friends. We want to do this as friends together. Like give it a shot. See, like compare like the British versus American schools and kind of like, you know, reorganize the podcast and try and like, you know, just use our personalities a little bit with it. And I feel like, especially with this switch to it being remote, I think it just is a natural time for me to hop on the express out of town. But like I said, I've enjoyed this podcast and I couldn't ask for a better podcast co-host. I swear there's no drama behind the scenes.
Oh my gosh.
We're not like at each other's throats.
Vinny, this is the nicest you've ever been to me.
Talk. If I don't ready, we'll go hot right now, you know. So yeah, it's just, I think we've definitely discussed it as well, especially like I've seen on my end, like you said, like every time we have to fly down to Orlando, I'm living it up at Disney World with my annual pass and you're there in the hotel room like, I miss my kids. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm at Disney.
Keeping the magic alive.
It's definitely been a thing where we've discussed it, and I feel like I'm excited to see you. Like this is also your third baby, and I'm excited for you to take the reins of it again and just see what you do. And I feel like it works out best for both of us. So then I'm able to carry on with all my content, and you're also able to carry on with your baby and curate this. And yeah, for any listeners that have followed along while I'm here, sorry that it's a short stint, but I hope you've enjoyed all my episodes, and don't stop listening now. Like we've still got another episode left, and then obviously tune in next week when I'm not here.
I truly love you, Vinny. I could not ask for a better friend. I'm so glad that our lives were brought together on the comedy tour last year, and I have all the respect for you and cannot wait to watch all of the crazy Disney stuff from you.
So I know I'm buzzing. I'm like, I'm already like, oh, Barbie, the Barbie movie comes out next week. I'm like, can we see like a Barbie Disney princess crossover? I don't know.
All right, so we are going to keep this train on the tracks and we're going to keep this going. So first things first, let's do a little bit of a hot take. All right, a hot take is when we give our honest opinions about a certain topic in education. It could be controversial, it could be not. We could agree, we could not agree. We could end up in an epic fight. Who knows? So today's hot take is ELA versus media and film. And Vinny, do you want to kind of explain what we're talking about with this topic?
It kind of also goes in line a little bit with all of the book bans and all of the discourse going on with politics and education, especially right now. But it's kind of looking at the ELA curriculum and the English classroom and basically seeing are these set texts even necessary at this point? Is there as much of a need for this younger generation to be able to go through and read these texts that are hundreds of years old and trying to go back through texts that have been pre-approved time and time again, but now they're saying, actually, we don't want to do them. So instead, they're replacing that text with another text that's also old and not as relatable to these students. As opposed to kind of modernizing it and looking at more modern texts and also looking at as more of a media standpoint, as, a trending film that's coming up, music, inspiration, things that are adapted from the text that are more accessible to younger audiences, as opposed to here's a text by some guy that died 200 years ago that you do not relate to. And now you've got to try and relate to it. And you're basically, myself as the next ELA teacher, I remember you're trying to teach a text from 200 years ago and the students why are we doing this? And you're I kind of get your point.
Some of those texts are problematic now.
Yes.
So you have to take the extra step to explain, why it's problematic and why it was accepted back then, and all of these different things that kind of lead to this thought of should we be modernizing ELA classes? I remember in college I took a modern literature class, and it was the first time that I had ever kind of been exposed to modern literature that wasn't a crime book that I chose or, a romance novel, or it was actual intellectual modern literature. And it was the first time I had been exposed to it. And it was eye-opening to me because I was wait, people wrote books after 1880?
Well, and this is the thing where I get so conflicted about the whole structure of the education system in the US, not to go into British versus American schools too soon, but it is in those last 2 years when you do your advanced levels, you're choosing to do English and you have to get a certain grade to qualify to be in that English class for that advanced level. So then you're doing more modern text. You're doing I remember I did one text that was a collection of short stories, a gothic feminist retelling of them, where you would read Snow White and it was from a feminist graphic gothic retelling. And I was this is the most interesting text I've ever read in a classroom setting. And I was 17. I was I love this versus in America, 17, you're still in a gen ed ELA classroom where you're told this is the set text you have to do. These are the set things. And even when you're looking at context, there's all these new laws in place where you're not even allowed to teach the full context as to what inspired the text, which then makes it even harder to engage those students in the first place.
I think it just opens up the world so much more when you do projects like that and rethink the point of views of the stories that we know so well. And I remember having these projects where we would read a text and I would have the kids write a response from a side character, what their point of view of that situation was. And you had to think about the mood. You had to think about their characteristics or their character traits and put into this project that, oh, wait, there are other points of view to the same thing. And I think it's so important for the kids in our classroom to kind of figure out and actually practice and see. And there's so much on the internet. I feel like everyone's scared of the internet.
Yeah.
I could go down that route too. ChatGPT scares the living daylights out of me.
AI to me, it's just it reminds me of iRobot. I'm oh my gosh, what's gonna happen?
I'm everyone stop. Everyone stop. We don't know this person that's behind. Oh my gosh, it is so scary to me. So with that being said, I feel like there are tools that we could use though in our classroom and and functions that we're not even tapping into in our classroom because we're like, we can't do that because it's on the internet.
Could you imagine it's like a film studio that was releasing a movie that was like child targeted, you know? So you've got like a summer blockbuster, something coming up, where it's a movie that's inspired by a tech that's already come out. And that like movie, that studio worked with a school and was like, oh, we're going to help you develop the curriculum for this to like teach the background of it. And in doing so, it spikes the students' interest and they want to see the movies, because at the moment, the whole like movie landscape is dwindling because post-COVID, people don't want to go to a movie fair anymore. They want to stream, and kind of like using that to like integrate into what students actually do in their daily life. Like, it's not as common for students to go home and read a book before they go to sleep. They're streaming their favorite show online instead, or they're scrolling TikTok. And I think... yeah, and it's also the attention span of it. Like, I noticed whenever I was teaching a text, anything that was longer than a novella, if it was like 200 pages long, one, there wasn't enough time in the actual curriculum to be able to hit all the standards and teach that effectively. And two, their attention would be completely done, because by the time you stop for all your assessments, all the other standards, all the mini tasks, all the random stuff you have to do, it's like, okay, we've literally taken 3 lessons off of reading this and now no one can remember what happened last week. And okay, I feel like it's me against a hill when I'm struggling.
I think we do need to take a step back from the standard text that we're doing, or the required text that we're all reading in high school and even in elementary school. I remember like teaching 6th grade, they were like, oh, we always read Hatchet. We always read Hatchet. I'm like, yeah. I'm not gonna read Hatchet, and nothing against Hatchet. Like, it's a great book, but like, let's try something new.
Like, with our current society, there's so much bleakness. You're going online and every day you're like, I literally scroll, and 1 minute it's a crying dog video, the next minute it's, oh, the planet's going to be hit by a comet in 2 days and you're all going to die. Next, oh, there's a new disease that's going to wipe us all out. Wonderful. Okay, now here's a funny video of someone falling over. And it's like, mentally, it's so hard to like... that it's like when you're going through all that and then you're like, okay, here's the text, here's your zone out, you're going to have a text so that you're not scrolling on your phone, and you get given the bleakest text you can imagine about life in the Great Depression, and you're like, okay, this is my outlet. Yes. I'm not doom scrolling anymore, but instead I'm being reminded of just how bad it was before. And I'm thinking, okay, with our current economy, are we heading back towards that? Because I just saw a TikTok that told me it's the Great Depression part 2, and now I'm not feeling this either. Yeah.
No, there is so much more out there if we just let it into the classrooms. And I think that's the hot take. Let it in.
Modernize the whole classroom, you know. Stop bringing politics into the classroom as well, and just, you know, teach things that are enjoyable to teach, that students want to learn about.
And the power of choice, and the power of like looking at things from a different perspective. It is the great part of any classroom.
British versus American schools. So this is the part of the podcast where we discuss a topic and we say how America does it versus how Great Britain does it. Quite often we also speak about which one we think does better, and 9 times out of 10 it's usually the UK, unfortunately.
I will say that I'm very ready for you to be done with this podcast so that like America can start to like feel good about itself again. That's all I'm saying. Especially around the 4th of July.
Oh, imagine. British versus American schools will be how they celebrate 4th of July in schools.
We win.
So today's topic is a topic where I think there is a chance that it could be a draw. I'm not saying I think you're going to win this one, but it could be a draw.
Don't give America hope like that. Oh my gosh. I hope I do you proud, America.
Right. The theme for this week's, for our last American versus British classrooms or schools, is themed classrooms.
Oh man, I think America does themed classrooms like no one else.
But
this
is the line that I've had to walk with my wife, because I decorate my classroom so Disneyfied. there was not an ounce of space on my wall. From the floor to the ceiling, Disney everywhere. The shelves had Disney trinkets on it. My desk, Disney stuff. Literally, if I gave out stickers, they were Disney themed. The hall passes were Disney-fied.
Oh,
the
no.
whole thing, to the point where my wife said to me, "But is it overwhelming?" And I was like, yes. So I think with this one,
Yes.
and I noticed this, at no point did anyone ever call me out and say, "Love your room, looks great. However, is this not overstimulating?" And now looking back at it, I'm like, it is. And I used to film videos in that room, and there were times where I look back at some of those videos and I'm like, the whole wall is plastered with so much stuff that I'm overwhelmed watching this video. So how would a student react to being in that when you're trying to focus on a task and then you've got all of these distractions on the wall? So yeah, what are your thoughts to that?
Yeah. Was this your American classroom or your English classroom?
My American classroom, I feel like in America is so pushed to, one, have a themed classroom, and two, if your classroom's not immaculate, it's kind of like keeping up with appearances. Your classroom is a reflection on you as a teacher. And if you're like, you know, in a room like I'm in now where there's bare walls, it kind of like gets the image of, oh, this teacher doesn't care. They've checked out. They're not the best teacher ever. So I feel like there's a lot of that, especially with the wave of, like, you know, Instagram teachers that have perfect curated Instagram classrooms. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
So when I first started teaching, I ate up every single ounce of what Teacher Graham was giving me, which was like, I need to have a themed classroom. I need to buy all of this stuff. I need to have these things on the wall, like inspirational quotes all over. I need to have a mirror with like, I am kind. I am like all of these self-affirmations, and I need to have this and I need to have that. And I did buy into it. I will say that it made me happy.
If I'm going to spend most of my life in this room, I want it to be a room where I can look at the wall and feel good. If this is my prison cell, I want it to be a nice prison cell.
Ding, ding, ding. Ding, ding, ding. That is exactly why I did it. And there could be this thing where you're like, you're not thinking about the kids. Like, what do the kids need in their classroom? And like, but at the same time, I was like, this is my classroom. And I'm not going to put anything in there that would be like harmful or, there was like my desk space was mine. So I had stuff like around my desk that like was for me. Because again, like that classroom was my space as well. We all shared it. And if any of the students ever came to me, it was like, I hate this. Like, I hate this poster that you have put. It is giving me the ick. I would be like, I'll take it down.
Oh, see, I was the opposite. I was like, that's my poster.
My last year teaching, I was given a brand new classroom to do. Basically, I went rogue and I painted. I didn't know if I was allowed to. I just did it. It was one of those, like, I'll ask for forgiveness later after it's all painted and dried. So I did this wall. I painted it white, and then I put like black paint strokes on it. And it was like a beautiful wall to look at, right? And I thought it looked great. The kids loved it. Everyone loved it. But there were some teachers that would come into my room and be like, that wall is so distracting. How dare you?
How dare you?
Like, that kind of hurt my feelings because it looked nice. It looked fine. But I feel like when you have teachers who have been setting up their classrooms the same way for the last 35 years, there's also this judgment. I don't know if this is really staying on topic of America versus British, but like there's this judgment that your room doesn't look like it's a learning space, if that makes sense. It's more of like an Instagram, background. And again, like I understand that, but I enjoyed decorating my classroom. I loved going in like 2 weeks before and doing it. That was my happy time. That was the only time it was ever clean. It was the only time I was ever organized.
Yeah, and I feel like it's pushed to the point where it's like, it's pushed, but then you don't get the funding for it, and you're expected to do it on your own buck. And it's like, okay, thanks. I did notice, though, like, even though my room was very over the top, I remember when I used to film videos in my classroom, I would get comments all the time saying, oh, he must be an elementary school teacher, maybe middle school maths. And then whenever I was like, I'm a high school English teacher and I teach freshmen and juniors, people would just be in shock because they're like, you have a Disney-themed classroom, but you teach juniors and freshmen. Like, what? And I remember just being like, and this is the thing, I was always like, once I spoke to my wife, I was like, it's quite overstimulating. I was very shocked. I never once had any students, any complaints, anything. All I ever had was positive things from my students, just being like, we like your classroom because it feels like a safe space. Like, in all our other classes, we're told, you're going to graduate, you need to go to college, you need to do all this, and we're getting pushed into being an adult. Whereas your classroom, we see this and we're reminded of our childhood, and like, we can see from this classroom that this is a safe space, that you're not going to judge us and you're not going to like... And like, for me, it's kind of like, that to me was worth me spending the money and the time on that classroom. Like,
I love that so much.
That's where I'm kind of like, I like themed classrooms because of that. However, in England, themed classrooms are not anywhere near as much of a thing. How it basically works is your themed classroom is basically dependent on what subject you teach. So if you're an ELA teacher, your classroom is supposed to do anything on the walls is directly related to the standards that they're teaching. So like, here are the standards, here are the texts you'll be doing. Like, but even then in England, you're not allowed to, because it's so big here, to display students' work and like, you know, it's like an award to be put on the wall. It's like the whole thing. In England, you're not even allowed to do that because of safeguarding and data protection.
You're like living a little if there's a little color in some English classrooms.
There will be a little pop of color, you know, but it's not like, oh, here's a whole rainbow mural that I put at the back of my room just to say, where I like have a saying that says, you are the sunshine beyond the storm. Like, you know. So yeah, but I think it also goes in line with, and I know we've touched upon it quite frequently, is like just how like expectations in British versus American schools are just so like, the way that British schools are run, it's like, this is the expectation, this is what you do. And it's very like by the book, black and white. And I feel like it's the same thing. The way the classrooms are set up is the exact same. It's like, you know, everything from the way that you're dressed in your uniform to the way the classroom's set up, everything is supposed to run smoothly like a machine, basically. And that's where the expectations come in versus... America, there's a lot more like room for freedom and choice and everything, but I think that's also where it's a good and a bad thing. I think that's also where you have some of those expectations, and that's where you get students pushing boundaries and parents pushing back as well, because it's not as by the book what exactly is and isn't allowed.
So I don't know, Vin. I feel like the way that you came into your American classroom and embraced your freedom to do whatever you wanted in that classroom, I feel like America won.
Yeah, baby. I think America wins with the fact that you have the choice for it. However, I think there are some expectations from the British one that I think make sense, like things like the data protection and things like that. I think the safeguarding that's in the British schools, I think it's there for a good reason, and it's by the book, but it's there to protect the students and the staff. So I feel like within myself, I'm a rule follower, believe it or not. I feel like I like having that, this is what you do, and yes, it does invoke a lot of fear, but I kind of like having that I'm not comparing my classroom to the teacher next door, but I also like the safe space that creating a themed classroom brings in America. So I personally say it's a draw, but I feel like you think differently.
At least give me something here. Come on.
Okay, I'll lower my expectations and let you win.
I'm just going to start singing the national anthem.
Hopped off the plane at LA.
Can't you see? Yeah. The real national anthem. Miley, thank you. All right, yay for America. We take a topic and decide if it's hot or not in the education world. So today's first hot or not is class stores or rewards. I'm just gonna go full send on this. It's a not for me.
I understand rewards. I'm personally not an extra credit person. To me, I'm like, if you've got 100 points, why are you getting 125 points for something? Because you did an extra question. Like, to me, when I look at someone's grade and I'm like, you're on 150 in my class, that the math just does not math there to me, quite. I don't know why. And then in terms of rewards, I think it's very strange. Like, I feel like people wouldn't expect this, but like in a high school, if you hand out stickers, they will love you for it. They'll be like, oh my gosh, we get a sticker, because it goes back to what I was saying.
No.
It goes back to what I was saying,
me?
because like, you know, once you reach high school, these students are told you need to be an adult. You need to, like, you know, focus on your career, college, all of this. When you're like, oh, here's like a glittery sticker if you do this, they love it. Like, they'll literally be like, oh my gosh, look at the stick. And they'll start comparing stickers and everything, and they'll really get into it. Food is one that, again, high schoolers will absolutely go rampant for. High schoolers will absolutely go for it if it's food. But then with food, I've noticed, and I've heard multiple stories of this, food as a reward is very difficult because you do not know the dietary restrictions of every single student off the back of your head. Especially if you're high school and you have 150 students, you're not going to memorize it. And then, you know, you get an angry parent email at 10 o'clock at night because they've found a wrapper to something and they're like, my child is not allowed to eat processed whatever. And and you're like, oh my god, I'm really sorry. I didn't know the Milky Way was going to do this. I think, for me, I feel like rewards, I prefer doing rewards more in a sense of it's a reward that I was already going to give them. But I pretend it's a reward when really it's a reward for me, such as, oh, if we finish this text, we'll watch the movie adaptation, but only if you're good. And then knowing fully well that I've planned to play that movie for 2 lessons so that I can grade the final projects. That to me is what I think is the reward that I go for more, basically. Yeah. That to me is the kind of reward that I prefer, because I feel like it's also that thing of like, you know, as a teacher, you don't have an unlimited budget. And I think once you start giving out things, that's the expectation. You start like basically screwing yourself over, because now you're like, oh, I'm the reward teacher, and you're like, I'm spending $100 every 2 months at Sam's Club on bulk amount of candy for students to do what is the expectation for them to do in the first place.
Right. And I think this kind of goes back to like the themed classroom thing of being like comparison of the teachers who are on the internet and even like in your own school. Like, oh, with this teacher, we got this. Like, neat. You're not in that classroom anymore. And I feel like class stores and class rewards, especially class stores, they were so hard for me to keep up with. Like, I used to do the class dojo where they would get, you know, money and they would get to spend that money in the class store. It lasted for literally 3 weeks because I was like, I don't know what, I'm making my own economy over here and it's very complicated. It took America, we haven't even figured it out in America yet. So it's like, why do I think that I could do this in my classroom? So like, I think it was just an extra thing for me to do constantly. But I agree with you. Like the things that I was already going to do anyway, like extra recess, my 5th graders would go crazy for.
Everyone works at different paces. There's some people that could absolutely breeze through a unit of work and then they get all the rewards and they're rewarded for it. And then there's people that aren't able to keep up with it as much, that are feeling like, oh, well, I'm not good enough because I haven't got X amount of rewards. And then you get that comparison. And I think it's more damaging to like your students in the classroom environment than it is rewarding.
With the food thing too, like a lot of people, I wasn't allowed to give out food. Like foods weren't allowed to be a reward ever, because whether it's like the psychological thing where like you shouldn't be giving food out as like yay for you, or just like the dietary restrictions, or parents don't want their kids eating certain things. And like, it was just easier to say, no, no food.
Yeah, so then you have to give out stickers, which which is fine. Like, but then it's also like, I prefer it more to be like, oh, I'm literally grading an assignment, it's on paper. I have a whole drawer of stickers I got from the dollar store. Let me just put one on, and then,
Yeah. Well, and then teachers get these like fancy like stickers that they used to stick on their hydro flasks. Those things are expensive. I tried to do that once. I was like, I cannot keep up with this.
Class rewards, I'd say, are a no, unless it's a reward that you're already planning on doing, in which case you just need to reframe what you're already doing because it's your reward.
Every single class is different. Like, what motivates them is going to be different from year to year. So I think just keeping in mind that the class, just because your class was motivated by this certain reward last year, is not going to be the same for this year. So I think class stories and rewards, if it's more work and if it doesn't make you happy or your kids happy, it's a not. It's a not.
Okay, which brings us on.
When your teacher bestie gets your old students.
I think there's nothing better.
When you are going through the same thing, or like they've gone through it and you're getting the kids now, like, it was so amazing. One of my teacher besties was a first grade teacher. And when I got that class in the third grade, like, it was just amazing to have someone who like understood like who those personalities were as a first graders, and just be able to talk through and complain and laugh, and then like talk about how amazing some like these kids were too, and just like the good memories that happened as well. So it is hot.
I
love
just
it. I
absolutely love like being able to discuss, and you have like in high school you have these students for a whole year, and you're like, okay, you figure out all the dynamics because you have students and they're in all these different set classes, so they interact with different people based on who they're actually like put in the groups with. And I find it so fascinating just hearing how like, you'll speak to your teacher bestie and you'll be like, that student's a student A and student B, or what's going on there? Like, are they still friends? They're like, what? They've never spoken. And you're like, oh my gosh, they're falling out over summer. I mean, it's like, I don't know why. It's so addictive because it's like you have these students for a year and you just become so invested in their well-being and their life and their development that when you're then speaking, it's like, you feel weird having a catch up with a student and going in and be like, oh, hi, how are you doing? Like, because once they're, especially in high school, once they're not their teacher anymore, the next year, like, they might be like, oh, hey, Mr. Thomas, how's it going? But they're not, you might have one or two that come by and like visit, but you don't have people necessarily come in and be like, they're like, you were my teacher last year, you're old news, I've got a new one now. Like, and it kind of like, it is like that at times.
Kick you to the curb.
It's quite refreshing being able to like speak to your teacher bestie and you're like, you go into their room for lunch to like a debrief about the day, then one of them walks in and you can both like say, oh, what's going on then? And like, yeah, I think it's definitely also really fulfilling as a teacher. I think when you've really struggled one year with a class, and then you, especially because I was always the newer teacher, that when it's a veteran teacher that's taught for X amount more years than me, and they're like, oh my goodness, this class, oh my goodness, this student, that student, and you're just like, oh, so it's not just that I'm a new teacher and I'm not very good at my job, it's the fact that this was actually a difficult class and no one listened to me.
Yes. I remember that happened when I moved down to third grade for the first time. They moved me from sixth grade to third grade. And because the class that I was getting in third grade, they were like, you seem like the teacher for the job. And I talked to that second grade teacher, and she was with me all year, just like listening to me sob and like trying to come up with different strategies for this class, like, and tell me the strategies that didn't work with this class. It was just so satisfying. And also, it didn't make me feel like I was going crazy or alone.
I think it's so therapeutic to be able to just like go then and be like, you understand this. We are both very knowledgeable in this field. It's like you're both watching the same reality show. You're just watching a later series and you're just trying to piece together the information.
And it was always like really interesting also like what parents reacted to different teachers. Like the parents that gave the teacher the year before such a hard time were like angels with me.
Yeah, I always found that weird when, like, you know, I'd say, like, oh, let's sit down, let's go over, like, who has who, and, like, give you any, like, information you may need that may help you. And literally they'd be like, oh, parent A, be careful, parent A. They were the one that cussed me out at the parent-teacher conference last semester. And then you go in and you meet them and they are literally the nicest person to you, and you have to...
And you're, like, shaking, like, meeting them, like...
And then you have to go to, like, your colleague and be like, so, like, they just didn't like you. They're like, what?
I feel like those meetings that happen at the end of the school year, and did they happen for you at the end of the school year when you would like meet and talk about the students like that were coming up to your class?
No, not in high school. I think that's more of an elementary thing.
So in elementary school, like those meetings usually happened at the last day of school. That was like one of our checklists for us to be able to leave. And we would sit down and have those meetings. I usually threw out the notes from that meeting because the teachers that had that class were so, like, emotionally done that they could not think of, like, some nice things to say. They were just so done, you know? And you know that feeling at the end of the year. You're ready. Yeah. You're ready to go into summer. And a lot of times, like, the things that were told to me about kids from a previous year I didn't end up seeing those things in my classroom. And I always wanted to give kids like a fresh start too, because the teacher before me was really different. And I'm going to be completely different for some other kids. Like, the kids that were really good for her were not really good for me and didn't like me. And so it's just that thing of, like, you know, these kids are why we're in our classrooms and why we're doing what we're doing.
And I also think it's like, I used to always do it more in a standpoint of, oh, I've had them, like, if you have any questions, let me know. But I prefer it more when they come to you and they say, this student's doing this, this, and this. And you're like, oh, yep, they did that to me. I kind of like that, how it unfolds. And you're like, okay, so now you're understanding exactly what I was talking about last year when I was, like, stressed out. I love that because, yeah, I agree. It's like when you have a new student, it's like, especially in the first, like, semester, like, these students are like, I've got a new teacher. I'm trying to, like, see what their vibe is, see if, like, you know, we get on. I'm trying to, like, adjust to, like, you know, if you're going up a year, it's always the rigor's slightly harder. So you're adjusting to new curriculum and all things like that as well.
I would cry as an elementary teacher when they would, like, walk by the next year and, like, not acknowledge my existence. I'm like, how dare you? I raised you.
Sometimes I would bump into my old students, like, just walking around, and they'd be like, oh, do you remember me? And I'm like, I taught you 3 months ago for a year. Of course I remember you. And they just, like, kind of are under the assumption that as soon as they're out, you've taken the file in your mind and just put it straight in the recycling bin and you just let it get deleted. I'd say it's definitely a positive to have your teacher bestie have the same students as you the following year. So yes, that was hot.
And if you don't have that, I think it's time to go make a new friend.
Yeah, it's a pro. Let's just say it's a hot, because that sounds very weird for that. In that sentence, I don't like that.
So it's not hot.
It's positive.
But hot. Positively stunning.
We're now moving on to our next segment. So this is one of my personal favourites, one of Jess's least favourites. It is Grind the Gears. This is the part of the podcast where we are given, I believe it's 30 seconds, is it?
Yes.
So yes, this is where we have 30 seconds where we get given a topic by the other person. And then we have 30 seconds to just completely rant about whatever the topic is.
All right, Vinny. For your last topic aboard the Hot Mess Teacher Express to rant about, we are going to have you rant about people who hate Disney adults. And you may go.
as a certified Disney adult, I just personally think, what is the harm in loving Disney, loving all things? If I want to go to the park and I want to put a pair of ears on and I want to dress as Mickey Mouse, what harm is that to you? There are people doing much worse things. All I know is that I have Disney in my heart. It was my childhood, and now here as an adult in this bleak, desolate land, I need something that's positive. If I want to dress up like a Disney princess and think that I'm Elsa from Frozen, I'm going to do that, and you need to let it go if you can't handle it, because I'm here every day living my best life, and just look in the mirror. Stop. Look in the mirror, because the evil queen will be looking back at you, and I know I'm the fairest in the land, not you. I don't get why people are so against Disney adults. I feel like Disney adults are very approachable people. But then I feel like I'm a Disney adult, but I don't feel like I'm a Disney adult at the same time.
Then you're a Disney adult, okay?
I literally just did a video with all my munchling stuff, and I'm like, mate, it's gotten out of hand.
Oh my gosh.
So Jess, your topic is people who make Disney their whole personality. Go.
Vinny, it's my gift to you. You do not have to listen to me horribly rant for 30 seconds about this topic. That is my parting gift to you. We still have another segment. You may leave. This just ties in so much with that thing we were saying earlier on the hot or not with the rewards, you know, when really it's a reward for you. Be amazing. All right, our last segment, as always, on the Hot Mess Teacher Express is underdogs. And this is where we celebrate people in education who don't usually get highlighted or celebrated a whole lot. So we're gonna take the time right now to celebrate these people. And this week we are highlighting theater, teacher, parents, students, anyone who's involved in the theater department in schools. We're highlighting all of the work that you're doing that often goes very unnoticed unless it's time for the production. So, did you have a lot of theater kids in your class?
So my school was very unique. I think they've started to do a theatre program now, but there wasn't really, I think there was a couple of sports. There wasn't really much of a theatre program. But one of my closest friends is a middle school teacher, and they basically directed the school play every year. And they were literally, I remember speaking to them and they're like, this is it, the next 3 months. Every single X day, this day, then as it comes up, and the whole thing with it, I honestly feel like, and it's the same thing if people are in band, they have to rehearse, out of school hours, everything. It's I feel like so often things especially theatre related teachers in that the arts are often looked down on and being like, oh, well, I had to teach a text, but all you had to do was give a trumpet to a kid's day. And it's so much more than that. I think, in all honesty, so many times the arts get so neglected.
Yeah.
And I think if you are anyone that's involved in any way, if you volunteer, if you're even a parent that has to literally shuttle your child to and from school, before and after school, to all these rehearsals, and you show up, and as someone that had parents that didn't often attend things when I was doing them at school, if you're actually going out of your way on your weekends and your evenings to even watch your child as well, seriously, props to you. It is a lot of work. It's very intensive. And I think the arts as a whole deserves so much more recognition, because the arts are what literally give us the hope in these dark times, and they give us the escape that, if you're having a bad day, you can turn something on or tune into something that is artistic to give you that escape. And I feel like if you are connected in that in any way, especially in a school, in this current climate, I feel like you deserve all of the congratulations and success and everything.
I remember teachers in our school that were doing school play with 6th through, or I think it was 5th through 8th graders. In an elementary school, that is hard. That is hard to wrangle everybody, because a lot of the responsibilities came down on the teachers to get the sets done and to get to organize everybody, and then the lights and all of the technical side of things. Those teachers went out of their way, often for little to no money, I don't think, and spent a small fortune themselves to make sure that the production is what they wanted it to be for the kids. And then those students that are in theater, like bravo to you for doing something that literally puts you in the spotlight, and it might be out of your comfort zone, and to learn extra lines and dance moves and all of these things that make the production, what you wanted to be. It's so much extra work. And as parents especially that go in and like believe in their kids and applaud the loudest for them. It's so much work in every single department to make sure that a production gets up and running in a school. And just bravo.
I love performing, but I hate rehearsing. To rehearse the same thing is exhausting to me. I'm an improv person through and through. I like to just go and just see how it goes. But the whole redoing it and being there for hours, I don't have the dedication. I don't have the focus. So seriously. And when you're doing that with students, teenagers, people that even elementary, middle school, I can't even imagine. And seriously, there's probably times where people go home and they're like, oh my gosh, why am I doing this? But just know that it's making such a difference. And, there are so many students that need that outlet, and you're just amazing all round.
All of that time and effort that you are putting in means the world to the kids that you're doing it with. Those students, sometimes that's the only time that people believe in them is when they're on stage, and you're seeing that side of them and putting that light in them. And I love it.
Damning.
All right, Vin, how you feeling?
I feel like I'm good. Yeah. Are you gonna shed a little tear
No, maybe. Just gonna curl up on that little couch back there and just fall asleep alone.
Yeah.
Sad. It's fine.
I think the same. It's like I said earlier, I feel like, everything happens for a reason. I feel like we've had a good, half a year of episodes doing this. I think, I feel like we've touched on some really great topics. We've done some, I'm happy with the work that we've done. And I'm so excited for you to be able to go back to doing this on your own and being able to prioritize doing this alongside, being a mother and being present for your family as well. And I'm just so excited for you to just continue growing this, and I feel like it's going to do so well. And I'm you don't need me constantly in the background running off trying to film costumes while you're focusing on your job.
Benny, I'm so honored and so excited for everything that you have coming up. Guys, Vinny has so many exciting things coming up. He's going to be a very important person. I'm going to predict in the next 6 months, you're going to be Hot Mess Teacher Express. What? I was on that one? No, what? No, just remember me when you're sitting in your little magic castle. This is true. I thank you so much for your time aboard the Hot Mess Teacher Express. We love you and wish you all the best. Make sure that you're following Vinny.
So it's Mr. Thomas English, and this you're on Instagram, and it's B Thomas English. Someone stole my username, unfortunately. And yeah, thank you so much to everyone that's listened, that's followed this along. And like I said, continue listening, even if I'm not going to be here. Jess is amazing, so listen to her. I listen to her all the time.
Thank you so much for being aboard the Hot Mess Teacher Express. Until next week. Anything to say, Vinny?
Choo, choo, choo.